Hi, and welcome to Security Theater, a podcast on the latest research in international relations and security studies from the Faculty of Political Science, University of Belgrade. My name is Tijana Rečević, and today I have a pleasure to host Dr. Omar Ashour, an associate professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Omar, welcome to the Faculty of Political Science and the Security Theater.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Ashour has published widely on the topics of asymmetric warfare, insurgency, counterinsurgencies, security sector reform in different regions, Islamist movements and ideologies, as well as on many other topics relevant for the issues of civil-military relations in the post-conflict and fragile environments. Today, however, we're going to talk about your recently published book titled How ISIS Fights Military Tactics in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Egypt, published by the Edinburgh University Press and Oxford University Press. So once again, congratulations on this amazing book. Your book seeks to explain the puzzle of ISIS being able to control millions of people worldwide for longer than 1,000 days after its preeminence in 2014, despite all odds in terms of the manpower and gunpower on the ISIS side. So how do you explain this a bit surprising endurance and military effectiveness of ISIS? How come that it fought so successfully against the international region and local forces for such a long time?
Thank you first for the kind invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys, and congratulations on all your successes, the podcast and the series and all other successes. Well, that book has a two-prong way, or two-prong introduction, if you wish. Personal one and more an academic one. So the personal one goes back to 2011, and Arab Spring was going on. We thought that this is like perhaps a fourth wave of democratization that is going to hit the region, perhaps a second wave of what we call de-radicalization, so basically moving from armed to unarmed activism, from violence to non-violence. And then in 2012 I saw a video in Syria specifically, of a movement that part of it became ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra back then, Nusra Front. And it was basically a tactic that they were trying to take a position. And what they did is the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, was trying to take that position from the regime forces. It was well guarded, multi-layered with several belts and obstacles. And the Free Syrian Army failed to take it for like a week or more than a week. And then enters the Nusra Front, which part of it defected and became ISIS. Previously, ISI, the predecessor of ISIS, the Islamic State in Iraq, sent it to Syria to form an insurgent organization there. So that group just lined up about 4 suicide cars, what I call in the book suicide vehicle-borne IEDs, and 1 truck. So 1 large S-Vivid, like a large suicide vehicle-borne IED. And the first car hit the first obstacle, second car, second obstacle, third car, third obstacle, and then the truck took the building down. And that lasted for less than pretty much 3-4 minutes. So what the Free Syrian Army, with its conventional ways, was trying to do for a week and failed, that group did it in like about 3-4 minutes and immediately capitalized. When I saw this, I was basically saying, okay, so now this is a bunch of tactics. This is not really a strategy. This is not even an operation and on one end, but it was very effective in a way that it turned battle victory from a few weeks stalemate to a 3-minute ending the situation. So if a group that is weak, outnumbered, outgunned, does not have much, most of the guys who entered to form it were non-Syrians. 3 of them were non-Syrians, 3 were Syrians who didn't live in Syria, so they did not know Syria that much. If they were able to do this in like a year, or maybe less than a year, and so they will probably won't, and if they think they can win with these tactics, so we're not going to see like this idea of fourth wave of democratization, because then the compromise, why would I compromise? When I can win without resources, why would I go into a legal, procedural, long, gradualist, compromises with my enemies when I can do this? And we won't see a second wave of de-radicalization. So that was a very disappointing story on my end, because I was a pro-democracy activist back then. It was a very disappointing story on one end, but at the same time, I was the scholar here was more pushed the activist aside and was more thinking, okay, so what we're going to see is probably more and more of these tactics, the development, the honing, and it pushes aside a significant, as you probably know, significant amount of the literature on insurgency, on guerrilla warfare, on asymmetric warfare. It just pushes it aside. Like the whole idea of population support, well, not necessary. No, ISIS had none of the towns that they controlled had a majority of them. They would basically, if they run in elections, they won't win. So state support, there was no state sponsorship. Geography, rugged geography, most of the towns were flat. They fought inside the town. They created their own geography. But the idea that you need the high mountains, David Galula's idea that the insurgent will fail if he could not get help from a geography, well, that was challenged. Even the Bibles, if you wish, like Sun Tzu, when he said tactics without a strategy is like noise before defeat. It's just tactics without a strategy actually is more than noise before defeat. You can have tactics without strategy and you can still pull up an upset like they did, because there was no strategy really. As strategy as we understand it, we can, not as more complicated than just a long-term plan. So all these, there was a critical review of a lot of the conclusions in warfare, basically on asymmetric warfare. So that was the academic story of the book, and that was the personal story. But then I was like, okay, so what? So now, we were wrong. The aspirations of a new wave of democratization in the region probably won't happen. So now what? So now what I was trying to explain was the how first. So how this organization have fought, outnumbered, outgunned, without air defenses, no air force, limited popular support, no state sponsorship, non-rugged geography, and almost without a strategy, and keeps on pulling one upset after the other, from Fallujah 2014 to Mosul 2014 to Ramadi 2015 to Sirte 2015 to Derna before Sirte to Sheikh Zwaid, where they were outnumbered almost 100-1 and managed to take the town. So how did they do it? And that was the very simple story that I was trying to delve as deep as possible in the book, and trying to understand really how did they do it from the other side. So most of the interviews were for people who fought against them, and then saw what they do on the battlefield.
Thank you for such an insightful answer. As for the personal motivation, it's on one side it's always it's not nice to see when the disappointment is a trigger. However, it's usually a fruitful trigger for research. We in this region know it as well. So the disappointment with the waves of democratizations and the hopes about reforms and etc. are often come to us also as inspiration on one side. As for the academic part, as you said, so practically the traditional accounts of these insurgencies' success have more or less failed to explain this. So in a way, you say that pretty much this is a new thing, although we have already known that state actors are not always successful in defeating armed non-state actors. You also say at some point that while I quote, while Islamic State failed in the art of the conduct of war, what it has exhibited in the art of fighting can and probably will transform our understanding of insurgent warfare for many years to come. So while this is new, you also prognose that this will become a new normal in a way. So could you elaborate on this?
Yeah, sure. So the data says exactly what you concluded. So the state, so I think I use some of Yale University's data sets and probably Rand's as well. When you have a state actor, an armed state actor, so an army or a police force or a mix of both, fighting a non-state actor, militia or an armed organization, insurgent, so on. When they fought, if you took the data from the 19th century, second quarter specifically, you'll find the state winning 90% of the cases if they clash. If you took the data from 1975 till now, till actually 2005 first, you'll find the state winning only from 90% to 25%. And then the rest is not insurgent victory, but the rest is a mix of insurgent victory, but also compromises. Like the state has to compromise, has to give them something, or sometimes, transform into a political party, or just have a power sharing formula in the government, something of that sort. So they need to compromise because they can't win. If they win, they won't compromise. So that's a change in the historical patterns. The state forces are getting weaker by time. So why are they getting weaker? Part of the story is what I was mentioning in the book. Is like the non-state actors are gradually and very successfully and persistently breaking that monopoly of violence that the state had almost a monopoly on, near monopoly on at some point. But not just that, the advances in technology of all sorts, ranging from mobilization and recruitment, social media, all the way to aspects of tactics that we saw that I explained in the book, from the teleoperated sniping to the drone warfare to the suicide tactics, to IED tactics, to even artillery, using your iPad to have more accurate artillery shots, all civilian gadgets, or nothing, too militarized. So all of these moves, all the advances, whether in terms of propaganda, selling narratives, all the way to tactical battlefield aspects on the ground, has basically transformed that balance. That balance, the state cannot assume that it will win in a confrontation with a non-state actor, regardless of the non-state actor. And ISIS was the most extreme case because that's a non-state actor that enjoys no sponsorship. So not really, the Houthis in Yemen, or Hezbollah in Iran, or any other actor, or the Donetsk and militias in Ukraine. So no state sponsorship. That's one. Two, no popular support. It's not really, the let's say 26th of July movement in Cuba. I always give the example. Fidel Castro's convoy went from Santiago de Cuba all the way to Havana, stopping in towns and villages and giving sermons and lectures. Nobody attacked. No air interception, no assassination attempts, no mines on the road, nothing. Smooth way to 500 miles. Imagine if Bakr al-Baghdadi, the former leader of ISIS, have done so between Raqqa and Mosul, let's say, which is half of the distance. But probably he would likely be killed by locals more than American drones or anything. The locals were going to fight him. So the difference is huge. Like the difference in terms of population support is huge. So here's the most extreme case, not just in terms of ideology, but also in terms of all the traditional values, which they doesn't tick them at all, and still managed to do that. Still managed to enter Mosul, decapitated. So their commander in Mosul was killed. In the 4th of June 2014. They took Mosul 10th of June 2014. So enter Mosul, decapitated, without a surprise, because the intelligence services had info on what they're going to do since May. So without a surprise, outnumbered probably somewhere between 1 to 50, because there were two divisions in Mosul, one police division, and police it's not a federal police division in Iraq has probably helicopters, has attack helicopters, Apaches. So it's a very well-armed police, and an Iraqi army division, both of them, with a force of somewhere ranging between 800 to 110 men, 1,110, so 1,100 men basically. So that was the whole force that took Mosul, the second largest city in Iraq, and then pulled that kind of upset. So the question mark was, how did they do it? And I was trying to explain this in details, how they did it. So I went about 17 urban battles, 10 fronts, 4 countries, and then within their provinces, about 7 provinces, engaged. Province basically means an organization. So it's an organization that's controlled by ISIS, but it's local. So ISIS in Fallujah or ISIS in Derna, it's controlled by the high command of ISIS, but it still operates locally and has local supporters and so on. I was looking at that, breaking them down basically on neighborhood, town, and city level, and then how did they fight in this, and how did they take the towns and the cities, and how did they defend them, because the defense was incredible. Like to take back Mosul took about over 10 months of fighting. Raqqa, same thing. And just in comparable perspective, Raqqa, the Americans, only the Americans without other forces, used 40,000 artillery shots to liberate Raqqa from ISIS. 40,000 artillery shots, that's more than the number of artillery used to invade Iraq in 2003. So to get them out of one town, not even a city, a town, a provincial town, they used the same number of artillery to invade all of Iraq in 2003. Just to give you an example of how tough they claimed to whatever they had.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's reading the rich data about the battlefields you analyze was amazing, and I highly recommend everybody to read the book. And I suppose it's very difficult to single out any of the battlefields as the most striking one, since reading from one to another, the next one always seems the complicated, at least for me to me as a reader. So you now told us actually in a way how come that ISIS has been so successful. But at some point you also say, however, they have failed and they will most likely fail in achieving their ultimate goal.
I didn't say how they were most successful yet.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That's for the book probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure, yeah, the failure.
Yeah.
You can tell me about it.
So practically, what do you see as the main reason for the so far accomplishments, be it success or failure?
So the success part, I'll just give you the brief overview. It was a mix of strategic shifts. Mm-hmm. So by strategic here I mean ways of warfare, mm-hmm. basically. So the organization had a capacity to fight small, fight secretive, fight in ways that is undetected, fight extremely brutal, soft targets, civilians, and so on. And then when it has and then shifts once it has enough resources to more of a guerrilla warfare strategy or guerrilla way of warfare. So strike and disappear, but hold territory temporarily. Upgrade the game from terrorism to guerrilla warfare. And then at some point they decided to have a conventional capacity. So armored artillery, and basically looked at like the Caliphate army looks like a regular regiment size formation, compared to any regiment in a state army. So it went conventional, and then when it loses conventional, it doesn't collapse like state armies. Like what happened in Iraq in 2003, it doesn't collapse. It just shifts down, or downshifts to guerrilla, and then downshifts again to secretive. Autonomous, extremely brutal, extremely dangerous to terrorism level, and then after that it gathered the capacity to become guerrilla again, and that shift was extremely significant in 2010. I think it was Ray Oderno, the commander of the U.S. commander in Iraq, who said that 36 out of 42 most senior commanders in ISI, Islamic State of Iraq, the predecessor of ISIS, were killed or captured. So the organization is pretty much over, almost over. Okay, so this is 2010. 2014 they were in the second, and he was right. He was not giving he was actually giving the data, and the data were saying this. They're almost done. But the capacity to shift back and then move forward, and to shift back, it was by choice. Like I think I say the story in the second chapter in Iraq, how they shift. They dissolved all armed formation at the unit level. The sniper formations, the guerrilla formations, the all these dissolved and became just basically, to simplify, bomb makers. So the sniper formation will be in charge of remote controls. These formations will be in charge of other parts of the IAD. These will be in charge of surveillance. These will be in charge of hiding, and so on. So basically dissolve the organization to become a bomb-making organization, and then start the terror. When they started the terror, I think that was what shifted the So it's an argument actually for all the scholars who concluded terrorism works. That's one example of actually terrorism could work. Yeah. So that shifts, and then we have operational and tactical. So tactics, I was going delving deep, like how did they pull an upset like that? How did they? So I gave you one example in Aleppo. I told you the lineup. So this was one of the 15 what I call categories of tactic. It's not exactly the tactic in detail, but it's categories of tactics, 15 of them that they excelled in. And they kept on repeating, and then this is non-ideological. This is just copy-paste from Mosul in north of Iraq to Fallujah in the south or in the center, and then a bit west to Raqqa, a bit west in Derna and Sirte, so on. So copying about 15 categories of tactics elsewhere when needed, implement them. And then there was also a level of operational art, if you wish, like how to enter a town when you're the foreigner. When people don't know you, when you speak a different accent, probably people don't understand you, when you pretty much you're fashioning your force in a country that you're a foreigner in. Because many of the commanders were foreigners, were like Iraqis in Libya or Iraqis in Sinai, or like Georgians in Iraq, or in Syria, and so on. So how to fashion the force. So that was operational art, like how to basically link these tactics to the closest thing to a strategy or long-term plan. So also I tried to describe that in details in some of their operational accounts that came out to be public. But then there was issues as well with the organization that were unique. These parts were unique, but there were issues that helped a lot, but they were not unique. Others had them as well. Like I talk about how they are independent. The formations fight independently, as if if they're cut off from their command, they don't collapse. They know how to
bottom up.
Yeah, pretty much bottom up. Also the moral force was very high, but also moral force against them was very high because lots of people hated them equally, so they wanted them out. There was a bit of this trans-regional, multicultural fighting experiences because they had fighters from all over, like the foreigners were from Latin America and the Caribbean all the way to Southeast Asia. So they had some issues that looked unique but was not really unique because others had them as well. But overall that mix of operational art, tactical, new innovations in tactics and shifts, I think that what gave them the edge. In many ways, so it was very much meso-level analysis, organizational level analysis, because the macro was for everybody. Yes, there was brutal civil wars, everybody suffered, but that was for everybody. That did not make them special. The micro, the same thing. They had the dogmatists, individuals who were like very dogmatist, but others had also dogmatists. They had the opportunists, the people that want to benefit from being a part of ISIS. Others as well had opportunists. They had people who were more oppressed in South empowerment through ISIS and South revenge through ISIS, but also others had them. And people wanted to take revenge from ISIS because of what they did to them. So these were non-unique in that way, but the shifts, the operational art and the tactics were quite unique.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I really see it as emphasizing the importance of the meso level is often rare. Actually, it's actually rare in the literature. So I see this as also one of the strongest points in the book. So maybe this is going too much in the next book, but at one point in one of your concluding remarks, you say that ISIS has not been defeated, and actually goes well with the things you've talked about a bit earlier. And then you said it can certainly endure and expand in a regional context where bullets prove again and again that they are much more effective than bullets. And so how will this end in your view? So where the region goes now?
So first a correction. I said it was down but not out.
Yeah.
So it was not destroyed.
Yeah.
But it lost territory, so that's like a. But what Trump was saying, like 100% defeat, and I destroyed it, and so on. This is complete. Like I think in the last chapter I was putting two quotes, one from Trump, like it's 100% defeated, destroyed, and then one from the acting prime minister of Iraq was saying, we're in daily battles with them. Like basically, what are you talking about? So so basically, it's not over, and I don't think it will be over anytime soon. And what's even more dark is that the tactics could be repeated, upgraded, innovated again if you have someone who's willing to do so, and there are challengers who are willing to do so. So there's a lot of copying going on. The suicide, it needs this particular ideology, suicide tactics, but the drone, the sniping, the artillery, all the rest of the 15 ones, the IEDs without suicide, that can be used. So that's one. The other thing for the region, it's kind of in a way, it's a sad story. Partly because the macro level look at the region basically. Most of the governments there are there either because they used a mix of violence and religious interpretations, okay, to legitimate the violence, or used violence and some sort of ethno-nationalism to basically promote it. So it's one or the other. So ISIS did not really do much, basically. They upgraded the violence because they're weak, so they needed to show more violence in that sense. And in a way, they used, the choice was between ethno-nationalism or religion, and religion went as more, or maybe more like sectarian, because it was not religious, it was very sectarian, emphasizing the Sunni Shia drifts and so on. So they went with sectarianism, like extreme sectarianism on one end and extreme violence on the other. So they didn't go that far from regimes that we have in the region. So that then it's like in a way it's a cycle where the non-state actor, rather than seeing the government doing compromises, accepting constitution, giving authority because they lost the votes, legitimacy is through other means. No, it's the non-state actor basically looks at how did this government arrive to power, and this is the two ways that or the two, not only ways, but the two main ways that arrive to power. And if you looked at the region, most of the regime types there fit in this description. There are exceptions clearly, Tunisia, some of the Arab Spring countries and so on. But in the rest, it's quite a sad story in that sense, and that's why ISIS yet surprised the world, but in many ways it was the extreme form of what was going on in the region for a while.
It took you to the next level.
Yeah, it took to the next level.
Yeah, and when we speak about taking something to the next level, another amazing thing about his book is its mixed method approach, and these are the final questions I would like to ask you. And so both the qualitative and quantitative part of the research seems more than impressive. So as for the qualitative part, you conducted many interviews with extremely interesting categories of interlocutors. However, what strikes the most, and what maybe I would like to ask you to give us some insights from the field research is, so you conducted some interviews with people who fought against ISIS and were related to ISIS as well. So I suppose that you encountered some technical, ethical, and all other difficulties more than usual. So could you tell us a bit more?
So I did about 58 interviews, mostly of people who fought ISIS or witnessed the battle as civilians. But I did not do interviews people who were close to ISIS. The way I did was took some of the interviews that ISIS did in its publications and just try to use it if it's relevant. So this is the way to, because the sample otherwise is extremely balanced and extremely so I wanted to just try to balance it out a bit. With the ethical considerations, you have to basically be very careful. Either some of those folks they were given the choice of either I use the information without mentioning them at all, or I use the information and I mention them by affiliation. So what do they do as in an officer in the Free Syrian Army? period who fought ISIS somewhere in Raqqa, but don't mention the name or even where did you do the interview. Or sometimes they give me a nickname or a pen name, you know, Abu Fulan, the father of Fulan, father of someone, but they don't give the name. Or I mentioned them by name. Some of them actually chose to mention, but that was the minority, you know, that chose to mention the name, the location, the date, everything. But some of them were in the media. They came out in the media and spoke about their experience. So those were, you know, already out there. But it was very tough to convince the ethics committee and you know, about that, because it is. I have to be, you know, it is dangerous. You know, it is dangerous for whoever speaks, because it happened that ISIS, you know, was not very happy with people who spoke against them and acted actually upon. And then the other thing that I did was the data, the numbers. So the numbers were gathered basically by three. It was a bit difficult, so I had a research team with me, and I have to thank them here for their efforts. So we gathered data from ISIS publications, and the interesting part is that you know, actually when we cross-check it with the media or with other sources, they tend to be honest about if they did the operation. They tend to be honest about it. They don't fake operation. Rarely faked operations. But what they tend to exaggerate is the number of victims. They tend to put it up on the high. But also sometimes what they do is that they conduct the operations but then put it down. So I gave example in Mosul, they had like over 482 suicide vehicle operations, and then when an officer, I think in CENTCOM, was asked, he was like, it's over 600 in the first 2 months only, you know. And they were saying for the whole 10 months it was 482. So there's a bit of gap in the numerics. So I mentioned basically, I'm not concluding how many operations they have done, but I'm showing these figures to just say their capacity to conduct these. If you have the capacity of conducting 482 suicide vehicles in 10 months, then no other non-state actors will have the armed non-state actors have that capacity. If you can attack over 8 prisons in a year, in 12 months, to get your cadres by force from these prisons, then that's a first. That's a first compared to any other armed non-state actors, including the Taliban, including the IRA, including the Tupamaros in Uruguay. That's the first. So then I was just showing, so the numbers is basically an indicator of their capacity as opposed to an actual accurate numbers. And what I tried to show also is the categories of tactics they use in each battlefield. How much, and also this is not the comprehensive numbers, but just to give you an idea of the capacity to use these and how much they are repetitive from town to town, from country to country even, and their effect on the outcome, because the battle outcome was decided because of these tactics. Most of the people who fought against them were basically saying, when you get them out of the ideological bias and extreme hatred and so on, you get them out, they would tell you, okay, they outfought us. Even we were supported, we were backed, but they outfought us. Why would they outfought you? Because they tell you the unit cohesion, the tactics, the surprises, the surprise elements, the maneuvers, the suicide bombings, and so on and so forth, and combined arms, unconventional combined arms. You use snipers on one end, suicide cars on the other. So basically, limit maneuver, limit counterattacks. So they pushed that edge to a level that probably most armed non-state actors did not have it, and part of that has to do with the experience in Iraq, because they fought the Americans in Iraq, so they had to either do or die in that sense. Either get captured or killed by the Americans, or enhance your capacity. It was Darwinism at work in a way. It was enhance your capacity to be able to withstand that. And then when you fight, the Iraqi army without the Americans, or the Syrian army without the Americans, then things look a bit easier.
And thank you. That sounds like an amazing experience. And the data set you mentioned, like the categories of tactics, the ways of warfare, is it something which is publicly available or to other researchers, or?
So I think I published part of it in the book, and then another part will come out like in other papers. But it's not public yet, but it will be public soon. Because I think I published at least half of them in the book, if not more than half.
Okay.
So it's there already.
Yeah.
You know, but
Great.
the rest will come out. Yeah.
So and talking about the data which is already out there and your ideas for the future books or articles. So what do you see as the major ways to go forward from here, as major avenues for future research?
Well, two things. Basically, this book is about how the weak fights, and how the weak, even if it is so evil and so weak, it still can put upsets. You know. So the extrapolation is other non-armed, non-state actors. You know, how they fight and did they experience from what happened with ISIS, because ISIS now became kind of their tactics, at least in the recent history. Right? So if someone was going to take these tactics and develop them and then use them again, which we saw a bit in Yemen, a bit in Syria, we may see elsewhere. We actually saw similar stuff in places as far as Colombia and Mexico, you know, with drug cartels, people who were, you know, completely different from ISIS and its ideology. So I'll see how this develops on one end, and then there is another idea about basically how armed non-state actors transform their capacities and capabilities. So similar in the same line, but with other organizations aside from ISIS.
Okay, thanks. We are looking forward to reading them. So thank you very much. We heard a lot, and that's only a tiny little piece of what is there out in the book. So please read the book. We highly recommend it. And thank you very much, Omar, for everything today and for publishing this amazing work. And thank you, everybody, for following us. Stay with Security Theater, read the Journal of Regional Security, and also follow the platform of Regional Security Knowledge Hub, and read and write about international security issues.